Getting started with HTML and CSS, Part 1, HTML Basics. Introduction. In this tutorial, I'm going to introduce you to HTML coding. HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. It is the most basic code that you can use to set up the structure of a web page. Do you want a banner at the top of your page? Do you want a menu beneath the banner? Should it be horizontal or vertical? Do you want a paragraph on the page? Do you want to have a table above the paragraph? Do you want to have pictures on your page? These are all questions that you can answer with HTML coding. You order all of your content on the page with the code. I like to think of HTML as the skeleton of a website. HTML can be used to style the appearance of items on your page as well. You can add code to take a really large picture, maybe one that's 600 by 400 pixels, and display it in the center of the page and change the dimensions so that it looks really small, like a 60 by 40 thumbnail per se. Cascading style sheets are used along with HTML to help alter the appearance of content on your website. If you want to make universal changes throughout your website, you can create one CSS style guide, connect every page on your website to the style guide, and then make changes to the style guide that will affect every page on your website. This is a huge time saver since you won't have to go to every single page and make the same edit repeatedly. You can also use CSS to create custom rules that will only be used in select places of your website. You will use HTML to add in those rules around specific areas of the page. So HTML and CSS really work well together. I like to think of CSS as the skin of the website. CSS will change the shape, color, texture, and even the position of the skin, but the HTML code makes up the bones that stand firm. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. In this tutorial, we're just going to focus on HTML coding. For more information about HTML coding, go to w3schools.com. The link is in the description. Tools. To get started with HTML, all you need is Notepad and a web browser. I'm using Firefox if you're interested in knowing. You will add your code to Notepad, save the file with an HTML extension, and then open the file with the browser to see what your code looks like. When you're done creating your website or web page, you can then post it on the server in order to make it public, but that's something we will worry about later. Create a basic HTML page and a CSS page. So the first thing I want to do is create a folder so that I can store all of my files in one place. So I'm just right-clicking on the desktop, creating a folder. I'm going to call it My Website. And inside the folder, I'm going to save my index.html page. The first page you want to create for your website is going to be called index.html. So in Notepad, I'm going to click File, Save As. I'm going to go to my desktop. I'm going to look for my folder. I'm going to save this as index.html. Save as type all files. You have to choose all files so that this doesn't get saved as a text document. This is a web document. I'll click Save and we're set. Now we want to repeat this process. I have another Notepad file open already, so I'm going to click File, Save As, and inside of my website folder, I'm going to call this style.css. Choose all files, click Save. Now we're not going to be using CSS coding in this tutorial. We're going to save that for the next video, so I'm going to just go ahead and close this. And from this point forward, we will be adding in some HTML code. Now, if you don't want to just work with Notepad, you want to work with a code editor that has more ability to give you some feedback along the way, help you make corrections to your code, or just it's just easier to work with altogether. You will have a lot of different options. For instance, you could use Notepad++. That's a long-term favorite for many. Then there's a code editor called Atom. You can go to atom.io to download that file, or you can go to notepad-plus-plus.org to download Notepad++. Kite is another tool that I've heard about. You can go to kite.com. I haven't actually used Kite or Atom, so I can't really give you my personal recommendation, but I see these two tools recommended in a lot of top 10 lists. So if you don't mind spending money, then you could obviously buy Dreamweaver or buy Adobe, which is a great tool. Dreamweaver is really cool because you can do your coding on one half of the screen and get a live preview on the other half of the screen if you work with a split screen. Or you could just work directly in code view or design view. But we're going to be doing strict coding in this tutorial. HTML coding convention. With HTML coding, you're going to be using tags. You will enclose the content that you want to display on your screen with tags. The tags are basically telling your browser how to display the content. Typically, you will surround your content with an opening and a closing tag. There are very few instances where you will not need to have a closing tag, but those are for very, very specific situations, and we'll get to some of them when they arrive. So basically the formatting is like this. You're going to be using the less than sign, you're going to be adding the name of a tag, for instance P for paragraph, and then you'll have the greater than sign. And then you'll have some content that you want to include for your paragraph. And then you'll have your closing tag. It's basically that simple, but it's a matter of memorizing all of the tags, or at least having a reference guide beside you. So this is basically what the most basic code is going to look like for HTML. With that being said, I don't want to create a web page using Word. I just did that so the text would be fairly large for you. So now let's go back to Notepad and let's start coding our website. Now, when you're creating a website with HTML coding, this is how you want to start your page. You want to have a less than sign. You want to have an exclamation point. You want to type in the word doc type, D-O-C-T-Y-P-E, HTML, and then the greater than sign. This is actually this is a fairly new convention. In the past, we would just start with an HTML opening and closing tag, and that's what we want to do next. Now, absolutely everything that we put on the page from this point forward is going to go in between the HTML opening and closing tags, creating a head and a body. Now, the next two sets of tags that we want to include is one for head and one for body. And actually, I'm going to just close this gap because the closing body tag and then the closing HTML tag are the very last two tags that you want to have on your page. And I don't need a space between the closing head and opening body. So basically, the body will contain all of the page's content that should be displayed in your browser for your audience. So if you have paragraphs of text, if you have pictures, if you have tables, if you have menus, forms, or whatever else, that's going to go inside of the body tag. The head tag is going to be used to add additional information that affects parts of your browser. For instance, if you open up a tab in a web browser, do you notice this tiny little icon in the tab? I'm using DuckDuckGo as my search engine of choice, and we have this little icon in the tab. This is going to be coded within the head tag of your web page. You can also add custom CSS for specific page elements in the head tag, within the head tag. It can also add some JavaScript and some other things like that. But we're not going to cover everything. I will teach you how to have an image for your tabs, and I will show you how you can add some CSS code within the head tag, but generally you want to keep your CSS code in the style.css page. If you have CSS code that you just want to use specifically on one page and not throughout your website, then you could place it within the head tag. And we're not going to cover JavaScript at all, but if you have, if you're good at programming with Java, you could add your scripting within the head tag. Another thing you can include in the head tag is metadata, which you can use to improve your search engine optimization. The metadata is not going to be displayed anywhere on the page, so different web crawlers that are being used to scour the internet and look at different web elements, and they'll use it basically to help figure out what is the website about. So if you have keywords, that's something that you include within meta tags. But we'll get to that later in this tutorial. Okay, before we start even adding content to the page, let's just go ahead and work within the head tag. One thing that I like to include is a title. So as you notice in the browser, DuckDuckGo has this within the tab, DuckDuckGo Privacy Simplified. So we can have a title like that similarly by adding a title tag and a closing tag. And you want to put some sort of message there. What is the name of your website? That's generally what you want to have. So I don't know, let's create a website called I Love Comics. I'm not a huge comic book fan. I loved them when I was a kid, but not so much now, but still we can make a comic book tribute website if we want. Now, before we go any further, I want to create a folder within my website folder, and I would just want to call it images. So any pictures that I have, I want to plug into here, and when I link to it, I'll have to acknowledge that it's in another folder, and then I'll have the file name. So, do we want to have an icon here in your tab? I think it's a good idea to have it. A great website to use is called a favicon. This can help you create icons that you can add to your browser. It's mostly going to be like a text or like a letter that's stylized. It's not going to be so much a graphic like with DuckDuckGo. But this is a great place to start if you don't have a logo or anything that you've developed already. So in the text field, you could you could just type in the name of your website. So like, I Love Comics. That's going to be way too big to use, but that's okay. The blue background is pretty good. I'll change it to red. The white text on red looks pretty good, or maybe black. I like white better. Having rounded corners is fine. I don't mind the font. The font size is way too big, so let's try maybe 22. It's still kind of small because the name of my site is too big. How about just Love Comics? That looks pretty good. I mean, it would be great if we could separate it into two lines, so like love stacked above comics, but that's not going to be feasible using this website, as far as I can tell. Now let's click the download button. Save the file. I will get my download, and I'm going to dump this in my image files. My downloads folder just opened in my other screen, so that's why you're not seeing it. And I will extract it here. I don't need the zip folder anymore, so I'll delete that. And as you can see, this is our little logo that we made. And we will link to these images in a moment within our head tag, so that the icon will appear when we go to index.html. Now, I guess one thing I should do next is go ahead and open up our file. Let me save this. And let me open it in the browser. So this is what it looks like. It's a completely blank page because we don't have any content. I guess we should just go ahead and create a paragraph here. You guys know how to do it from earlier. So create the p tag, write down hello world. That's the most traditional way to, this is the most traditional thing to type the first time you create a web page. Let's save it, let's refresh the page. And as you can see, hello world appears on the page. So congratulations, you now have a website. And no one can tell you differently. And I Love Comics is appearing in the title. If we want to have the little icon for that we just created, we're going to have to link to that. So this is going to be a little bit tricky. We want to add, actually favicon gives you the scripting that you need to include. So let's just open up the images, and I believe it's in here in the about. No, I shouldn't have closed the website. Now, yeah, this is the scripting that we need to include right here. So we don't have to type it out manually. If we can take shortcuts when HTML coding, that's great. So I'll put it right beneath the title. I'm gonna have to make adjustments to the link location because I don't have my index file in the same place as my images. I have my images inside of two different folders. So where it says href, this is where I want to basically add my link to my files. So I want to type in, I'll get rid of the slash and just type in images / fav icon _io and then / apple touch icon.png. I'm not going to type this out every single time, but I'm going to copy that, get rid of the backslash, and then just paste. Get rid of the backslash, paste. I guess I'll include that for this too. I'm not really sure what the web manifest does. I will include it just in case. But basically, we have three different icons because just in case if people are using different types of gadgets other than just the traditional browser. If someone's using like an Apple Touch, this link is probably going to be best for that environment. So now let's click save and see what happened. Okay, my icon is appearing, so that's great. So if you didn't name your folder images and you have to name differently, go to your folder and just make sure you're using the correct name. So if you had called this media instead of images, you would type media / favicon -io _io, I should say, and then the name of the image file. So we have a title, we have an icon, and then the head. And one other thing that we want to do is link to our CSS page that we created already. Remember, we have one called style.css we created at the start of the tutorial. So to link to your CSS page, you want to type in, let's just type it out manually, $, link rel =, quotation mark, style sheet, quotation mark, > sign. But we actually need more content than that, so let's type in type = text / CSS, quotation marks. And href, which is telling us where is the file located, is in the same folder as index.html, so we don't have to type in a /images / favicon _io or anything like that. So we just type in style.css. Now, if we went to our folder and created a CSS folder, and we push this file into that folder just to have everything nice and organized, then I would have to type in CSS / style.css or whatever the folder name is. But since it's all in the same directory, Just typing in the name of the file is enough. So that's everything I need within a head tag. You could leave all of that blank, and if you wanted to, I would definitely, if you include nothing else, I would give your website a title. Just so that when people have multiple tabs open like I do, they'll know which tab is for what. Now, within the body, there's a lot that we can do, so let's get into this. I'm including a link on the screen. Go to w3schools.com/tags/tag_head.asp, or just go to w3schools.com and look for a tutorial on HTML, and then look for a tab related to the head tag. Now let's just focus on the body for the rest of the tutorial. So we have a paragraph tag that says hello world. What else can we include? I think it's a good idea to have headers throughout your page so that you can separate the content using headings, kind of like a if you're reading a book, you generally see chapter 1 on the first page, or prologue, or chapter 2, chapter 3. So the headings is basically just another way to visually group information on the page. So the heading tag is H1, and I'll call the page home, and then I'll have a closing heading tag. Now, you don't just have to use H1, you can use H2, H3, H4, H5. So let's try experimenting with H2, H3, and some of the other level headings. Just to see what the headings look like. I don't know, you can type in whatever you want. Let's just save it. Let's go to our tab, refresh it. So this is a level 1 heading, it's pretty large. Hope you don't mind. This looks like Times New Roman. The easiest way to change the font is to just do so with CSS, which will be in the next tutorial, but for now we'll just leave it as this. So that's level 1, 2, 3, 4. This is kind of small, so these aren't going to be that useful for level headings. I would maybe make these larger and change the font and the font color just to make them stand out a little bit more. But we'll do that in the next tutorial. For now, I'll just delete the level 2 and the level 3 headers, and let's just stick with level 1 and level 2. So, okay, we've been talking about linking to images using the fav icon. Let's try linking to an image directly on the page. So, the first thing we want to type is the less than symbol, img for image, src for source, equals. I know that the tendency is to type in href, but for images we're just going to type in image source, equals. Now we need to have the location of the images. I have an images folder, so images slash, and I need the name of an image. So let me open my folder. I don't have anything in here, so let's see. I have a media folder here from a different tutorial. Let's just grab one of these pictures. This one is cool. I'll just make a copy of that and stick it in here. Let me see what else I have on my computer. I'm not that fond of that picture, so I have one here of an ocean sunset, and we'll just stick with that. If you want to preview it, this is what it looks like. So let's embed that on the page. Let me copy the file name, it is going to be a .jpg for the extension. So images slash, that's the folder, slash file name .jpg. And I need to have the closing quotation marks. I'm going to give it an alt tag. And I'm just going to describe what the image is. So it's a picture of the ocean, it's an image, it's a JPEG file. Now, what is an alt tag, you're wondering? Whenever you have pictures that you want to include on your website, I think it's a great idea to include an alt tag. An alt tag is basically giving some text that describes what the image is. So that's why you want to have an alt tag. You want to have a description of what the image is in case someone doesn't have the media loading on their page, or if you have people that are using a screen reader or some other device to read the text out loud to them because of impairments and they can't view the screen as well, they will at least have a text description of what the image is, and that can help them out. So for making your site accessible to a broader audience, it's a great idea to have an alt tag for all of your images. For videos, you're going to want to just have a transcript, but we can talk about that later. Now, let's finish with the tags for this image. Actually, I'm just going to go ahead and close it. Now, for an image, this is the one of the few times you don't need to have a closing tag, so you don't have to have /img. That's not going to work. Now, let's save it and see what it looks like. This image is gigantic. You can use CSS code to make it smaller, or we can just do it directly here. So I'm going to type width equals, let's make it 300 px. Px stands for pixels. A pixel is like a tiny dot on the screen, so that's the width of 300 pixels. So the more you work with art programs like Photoshop, the more you'll get used to thinking of widths and heights in terms of pixels as opposed to inches. So just experiment with different numbers. If you make this 30 pixels, it's going to look like a really small, like a stamp. That's smaller than a stamp. 3000 is obviously going to be way too big, so 300 is pretty good. Okay, so we have some text, we have a header, we have a picture. Let's see, what else do we want to include on our page? Let's have a list. Let's call our list something like, I don't know, favorite breakfast foods. Favorite breakfast items. So, the first kind of list that we'll create is going to be called an unordered list, which is like a bullet list. So, the tag that you want to start with is UL, which stands for unordered list. And then we want to have a closing /UL. And for every item in the list, we're going to have tags. So LI stands for list item, and we'll have a closing LI. And I'm not going to make like a list with 5 items and type that out every time, so just copy it and paste it. I'm just going to list 3 different things that I like to eat for breakfast. So I like pancakes. I like oatmeal, and I like smoothies. I generally don't eat smoothie. I don't drink smoothies for breakfast. Now let's save it and see what this looks like. There we go. There's the bullet list right there. Now let's make an ordered list. So let's make a new group. Instead of favorite breakfast, let's just call it, I don't know, favorite composers. Instead of UL for unordered list, we're going to have OL for ordered list. And we won't have food items. We'll have names of famous composers that we like. So I like Vivaldi. onto Verdi is pretty good. And Bach. Those are all Baroque era composers. I guess I can name a more modern composer. Glass. Philip Glass is pretty good. I'll just stick to classical composers just for consistency's sake. Let's save it and see what it looks like. There we go. Now let's create a new category. Well, let's create a new section for our page. Let's call it, let's use it in H3 tag. Look, coding by hand is a long, slow process, so I know this video is already pretty long, so it's just something you have to get used to. Let's call this useful links, and we'll create some links to different websites. You can also use this principle to create a navigation bar later, but we only have one page, so we don't really need one right now. So what are some good websites to link to? Maybe eBay or something. Let's say we have an eBay store. So for a link, we're going to have a href. You'll remember href from earlier. I don't really know why we don't use href for just linking into an image, but we don't. We use image source, but for links in general, and for links in the header tag, anyways, for the 5 icon anyways, we're going to use href. Equals, let's type in ebay.com. Normally, well, we should type in a http://ebay.com. Target equals, type in the quotation mark, an underscore blank, quotation mark, and the greater than sign. So this is where the link's going to lead us to ebay.com. Obviously, if you have an eBay store, you'd want to include the full URL, but I don't have an eBay store, so the target equals underscore blank. That means that basically when we click the link, it's going to open up in a new tag. So just remember, you want to use blank whenever you want to open up into a new tab. If we were linking to another page on our website, we don't want it to open up in a new tag. We just want to go straight to that page within the same tab of your browser. So you would just not even you wouldn't have to include this at all if we're just linking to another page on our website. But whenever we link to a page that's somewhere else, I recommend having that open in a new tab so that people can go back to your website easily by just simply closing the new tab, rather than trying to click the back button or remember what your URL is. So that way your site's always open. Now, let's just type in something like eBay store, and then let's have a closing tag for the link, which is going to be /a. So A is indicating that it's a link, href is telling you what the exact location is, target is telling us to open the link in a new tab, and then we have the closing tag for closing the link. Let's save it and preview it. And as you can see, eBay opened up in a new tab. I'm trying to think of something else we can do. We can add a table. Let's just go ahead and do that. So when formatting a table, the first thing you want to do is have an opening table tag and a closing table tag. And then the next thing to consider is, well, you want to have your table planned out in your head or draw it out on paper before you start coding it. It'll just make it much easier. So let's just say I want to have, I don't know, maybe 3 rows and 3 columns. For a table row, you want to have an opening and closing table row tag, so TR for table row. And in between your table rows, you're going to have columns. Actually, you're not going to really indicate columns, you're going to indicate cells. So TD stands for table cell, basically. And the number of times you have the TD opening and closing tags, that stands for a column. So here's a row with 3 columns. Now I'm going to copy this 3 times. And now we have a table. So let's save it and see what it looks like. I guess that would help if we had some content in the table. So let's put some content in. What do we want the table to be about? Let's see, before we even give a table, let's have a header. So, I mean, this is supposed to be a comic book store, right? Or comic book website. So instead of talking about breakfast or composers, we should probably talk about comic books. So, let's just call it sample table 1. Let's just call it comic books. So that's just having a header just to set up what the table's about. So let's have a column called company. Let's have a column for characters. Let's have a column for maybe the genre. Instead of character, let's just characters plural just to make it singular. So these will be basically our headings for the top row of the column. I would like to have some formatting. I guess I can jump the gun. Let's have an opening tag for B, which stands for bold. And let's have a closing tag for B. And let's repeat that for each of the column headings. And let's save it, see what it looks like. Why is it not showing up? That's a great question to ask. One thing I'm going to do for the time being is type in border equals 1. I have my opening table tag and my closing table tag. Every row is opened and closed. All of my cells are open and closed. So this should work. There we go. It's just the table is really small. It's only going to respond to it's only going to show up and respond if you have content inside of the table. So I have a border, so that's why you see the outline. If I set the border to 0, it would just look like text side by side. If you set the border to 5, it's going to look really, really large. Well, the thickness of the border, the outside border, I should say. 1 is pretty good. So let's add some more information to our table. So the first column is going to be company. I have the text bolded, if you noticed. Let's say I want it to be italicized as well. I can put in an I for italics. Then have a closing I. I'll save it and show you what it looks like. I don't think that looks really good, so I'll just leave it for now. That's okay. I'll save, refresh the page, and now we have a table that's filled out. You're probably thinking, well, the text is really crammed together, the table's not really spaced out really well. So we can add some code here. Let's make the table width 500 pixels. And let's just see what happens. If we save it, I'm clicking Control S to save, just to save time. So that adds some space. But you're probably thinking that we could have more space at the top and the bottom. Well, actually, let's just save that lecture. Let's just try to get some more elements down on the page. We'll work on formatting things later. Let's just figure out what we can do for the time being. So we have a picture, we have headers, we have lists, we have links, we have a table. What else can we do? Let's just go ahead and start wrapping up this tutorial. Let's have maybe a footer section for our page. What can we do to differentiate maybe the top portion of the page from like a bottom portion? Maybe add a vertical line. So one tag that we can add is just HR. That'll add a vertical, or should I say a horizontal line. So I saved it, refreshed the page. Actually, I put that inside of the table, so that's incorrect. I want to put it after the table. So let's save it. There. I kind of want some spacing between the table and the vertical line. The horizontal line. I keep saying vertical. So if you ever want to have just a line of blank space, just having an opening and closing paragraph tag is not going to work. Well, okay, it worked in this situation, but there are a lot of times, like if you're using WordPress or something like that, just having an opening and closing paragraph tag is not going to create that space, so you need to have something in here. So the most universal approach to just having blank space, so the code that you want to type in is this. So if you had like a two words and you had this code between them, it would add it would be like hitting the space bar. So this is basically the universal way to create a line of blank space on your page. So it's the and sign, NBSP, and a semicolon. We'll save it, refresh the page. That actually created a much larger blank space, but that's cool. Then we have this horizontal line. After the horizontal line, let's maybe add some information like a disclaimer. Let's use the bold tag to make it stand out. Disclaimer. Let's get rid of the bold. Let's have our closing paragraph tag. What do we want to say for the disclaimer? Maybe all rights reserved. Copyright 2021. Do not use content on this website without permission or something like that. Let's maybe put this on a separate line. So let's have a closing tag. Let's have an opening tag. Let's bring up our closing tag from earlier. Let's save this and see what it looks like. So, I mean, it's just good to have some sort of information at the bottom saying that you own the copyright and I don't want people using my content without permission. It's just a good policy to have on your website. So, or you could just have a link to a separate page for information. And I mean, we have a pretty good start to a website. You have headers, you have pictures, you have links, you have tables. You could set up a long vertical, or you could set up a long horizontal table, I should say, and have links to different pages here. If you want to embed a YouTube video, let's just go ahead and talk about that. If you click share, embed, this gives you the code for sharing a video. Let's just add that code here. Let's add it somewhere on the page, maybe beneath the table. Let's just save it and see what happens. So there you go. You have a video embedded on the page. I want to have some space above the video, so I'm going to copy this paragraph tag with the spacer. I'm going to click save, and that gave me a nice gap between elements. So let's see, what else can we do? Do you guys want to format the table? Let's just create a new table while we're here, and I'll show you how to merge cells, merge columns, and things like that. So this is a pretty good start to making a website, and in the next tutorial we'll talk about adding CSS. So stay tuned for that video. Thank you for watching.